I am post-tax season confused about life right now. It
Yeah,
takes
I
a
can
little
only imagine.
while. It takes a little while for me to come back online. I'm Jamie O'Kane, CPA, small business advanced tax planning and compliance extraordinaire. And this is the Abundant Beans Podcast, the podcast that takes my love for learning what makes people tick while digging into the good, bad, and ugly of small business ownership. We strive to give you the insight that only those in the trenches of being and working with entrepreneurs can provide. All right, so today we're going to welcome to the podcast Jarod. Oh no, how do I say it?
Spiewak.
Jarod Spiewak. Jarod is the founder and lead strategist of Blue Dog Media, a boutique marketing agency that helps service-based businesses, mainly law firms, acquire more clients through search engine marketing. The goal of Blue Dog Media is simple: to make clients more money as quickly and efficiently as possible. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
No bio readings going well today.
That is perfectly fine.
I always tell people I can't read out loud very well. My kids are always like, "Mom, read to me," and I'm like, "How about you read to me?" I got like 10 minutes of that in my kids. So tell us, what was your first job?
Oof. So a couple ways you could look at it. You could look at it as the first way I ever made money, which was when I was in 5th grade. I would write short stories and then sell them to my classmates for $1 a copy. So that was the first thing.
I love it.
The second thing was when I was 14, I started writing online for about less than a penny a word as kind of my official quote unquote start in the online world. And in the interim from there, my mom worked at a retirement home and she got me a job there as a dishwasher, and I worked there for a couple months. I've only had a couple W-2 jobs in my entire life. A couple months as a dishwasher, a couple months as a what's it called? Not a couple months as a busser at a diner. I did about a little over a year in corporate marketing after that, and then I was on my own. So I've only have like 2 years of W-2 work experience.
It sounds like you started your entrepreneurial journey real early.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
$1 a story sounds like a really good start. My daughter actually, it was like 2 years ago. So she's 10 now. So she had to be like 7 or 8 at the time. So she's like 3rd grade. She had like a little bag of Cheetos or something, and she somehow sold it to one of her classmates for like $20. Like my mother-in-law was like, should we call the mom, or like, what do we do? And I was like, good job, kid. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, they made a deal. Like, we have to respect their deal. And then I was just like, was that a fair price? And like, we talked about that. I was like, but like, his priority for that money was obviously that little tiny bag of Cheetos. And it just shows you that people have different money priorities. They were talking about that. And it was just like this whole, like, my mother-in-law was like, well, we need to call the mom and give the money back. And I was like, I'm not getting in the middle of this deal. If they come back to us, we'll talk about it. But he must have really wanted that bag of Cheetos, or she must have really sold it well. I don't know which.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see the sales process right there.
Yeah, like, how did that
What
go
was the
down?
funnel?
How'd that go down, babe? She was like, well, yeah, I told them they could have it. And they were like, okay. Whatever.
Gotta start somewhere.
Yeah. So tell us about your career journey. How did you get into marketing? And
Yeah, so I've been interested in business for as long as I can remember. From when I was 8, I've always been a big gamer as well. So when I was 8, I was mostly playing like flash games on the computer, and my favorite games to play were always business and tycoon related games, like business management games. And that's kind of like odd, I guess I could say, but I think that kind of started off with me having like the overall interest in it. And then when I was 14, I graduated I started college at 15, graduated high school at 16. The year discrepancy there is because I ended up getting screwed by the school, but that's a whole different story. And so I was like, okay, great. I need to figure out how to make money. I was 14 at the time when I knew that I was going to graduate early. And so I can't get a job around here until you're I think 15 technically is when you can get hired around here. But most places won't hire you to your 16. So I was like, okay, great. I had to figure out how to make money. So I Googled, how do you make money online? Not a very reliable source of information, but that eventually led me to writing online. And I found a website called Hire Writers, where most people who sign up for that tend to be foreign, and it tends to be like, hey, get a lot of cheap content. And so being a native English speaker, it was pretty easy for me to find work there. It was very cheap writing, like less than a penny a word, but I was decent at putting words together for what people wanted. But what everybody wanted was SEO content, because everyone was just, hey, put these keywords in this 100-word piece of content X amount of times and then send it over. No idea really why. I didn't really figure out why that was until someone wanted me to write a piece about SEO, like how you do SEO and whatnot, because I had no idea. I had to research it. So that got me into understanding what this was and why I was doing what I was doing, but I didn't really develop any interest into that. So this is where it gets a little bit long. So I'll try to talk a little bit fast here. But so this eventually led into me not really caring too much about it. I did a little bit of writing. I also worked on Craigslist for a bit as kind of like a gig worker, where someone needed something, I would do it. Someone needed a math tutor. Great. I was a math tutor. Someone needed as funny as it sounds, someone needed a business coach. Well, I was the 15-year-old that showed up and said, hey, I'm your business coach. Someone needed a writer or editor for their book. Then I guess I was a writer or an editor for their book. Just whatever it was that got me very comfortable with sales to a certain aspect. I didn't really make money because most of these people that were looking for stuff were looking there because they didn't have money to pay anybody. And so it was just a couple bucks here and there, whatever it was. And then eventually I let all that by the wayside after I was going to school for my marketing degree, either right before I started there, or no, I was already in college at the time. So I was already in college, and then I was filling out resumes for marketing jobs. Most marketing jobs want you to have it's one of those hilarious requirements where they want you to have a 4-year degree, 10 years of experience, know everything under the sun of every marketing channel. They want you to know communication skills. They want you to know programming, and they want to pay you $25,000 a year. So it's just one of those.
Or they want you to pay them $25,000 a year.
So there's just a big discrepancy between the actual role and the HR department. So eventually I finally managed to get an interview somewhere with a local, well-known real estate corporation. They own most of the well-known buildings in my area. So everyone in the area knows them. I was like, okay, great. This is a great opportunity. They hired me as their quote unquote social media person. And they couldn't even know they could hire me legally. I was only 17 at the time. They had to clear it with someone above in the company. So I was hired there at 17 as a quote unquote intern. And it was one of those not legal internships.
Yes.
We call them an intern so we don't have to really pay them much. So nothing that was actually in the job description is anything what I did. My role was mostly managing the marketing activities of basically like posting on Craigslist for the property managers, which I was very familiar with Craigslist. So
yeah, you're like, I got this.
Yeah, that was part of it. Then every once in a while, something else was thrown my way. But after about 6-7 months there, I started freelancing again on the side a little bit. Actually, this might have been closer to about a year there, to be honest. So after some amount of time, I knew that I wasn't going to be there for very long. My kind of any aspirations for like moving up or whatever were just completely shot down all the time. There's only like 2 people in the entire marketing team, me and my boss. So not a whole lot of room to move up there unless they wanted to essentially create a new position for me. And overall, I just wasn't really having it, wasn't really for me. So I started freelancing online. I started to look up again, what was all this SEO stuff? What was this? What was that? I also started doing a lot of other stuff. So I started learning more about social media. I started learning more about SEO. I started learning more about advertising, started learning more about programming, so on and so forth. So I was mainly at the time learning online marketing and also like programming, just because I have a good interest in it. So I was learning how to build websites. I was taking programming and scripting courses. I was working for $5 an hour on a site called Upwork because I signed up. I was like, okay, great. Who's going to hire me if I don't have any experience? So let me work for $5 an hour. Over time, that eventually moved up to a little bit more and more money. Over about a 3 to 6 month period. I started a web development company. After 3 months, I was like, yeah, this isn't something I'm interested in. Haven't touched web development for client services yet. Still interested in development, just not interested whatsoever in working with clients in that relationship. But
Yes.
over time, just developed more and more SEO skills mainly. Then I got an offer for from an agency to work with them. So it was double the hourly rate as being a freelancer for them. So I quit the agency job, was now working from home, working double there. About a year later, started doing more and more freelancing work. Eventually, my my agency work went from full-time to part-time, down to no time. I was like, okay, great. Have all these clients. What's next for me? Guess I'll start my own agency. And that was about 2 years ago.
That's awesome. So tell us about Blue Dog and what you guys do and who you work with.
Yeah. So as you said at the beginning, we're a boutique marketing agency. What that means is we only work with a handful of clients at a time rather than the more traditional volume model. So we work with a very limited number of clients, focus on service-based businesses. About 50-60% of our clients tend to be law firms, just because, not that we necessarily focus on reaching out to that market, it's just as I just have a lot of experience with legal marketing, and when these law firms are looking for people to work with, most of the people that they're talking to don't have that experience. So it's a lot easier for me to talk with them about bar regulations and how cases work and stuff like that. So it's just easier kind of, basically, if someone reaches out to me, their law firm, typically they end up going with me, just because, again, the experience thing. So service-based businesses, the services that we provide are SEO, ranking organically on Google, and Google Ads, PPC, which is paid ads on Google. Those are the two things that we do, because those are the two things that we're good at. I don't believe in the full service model. And at the end of the day, the only thing we care about is what is the client paying us and what are we getting them in return for that. I don't care about anything in between.
That's awesome. So let's talk about marketing with service-based businesses, because I am one and we work with a lot of them. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see that most service-based businesses make, like in like their growth, their marketing growth? Really a lot of it is about online now, that know, like, and trust stuff.
Yeah, there's 3 big things that I would say are mistakes, and we can dive into any which ones you want. But one is not tracking things, where most can't track a click back to revenue, meaning that most service-based businesses cannot say, okay, great, of the $2 million we did this quarter, this year, this whatever period of time, what percentage of that was because of Google Ads? What percentage of that was because of PPC? What percentage of that because of this, that, and so on forth? So first is actually tracking where things are coming from. The reason why this is such a big issue is that it's really hard to determine if, one, your investments are paying off, but two, where you should pull back investments from, but also double down on investing into. Next, so tracking is part of that. Next is understanding every key aspect of what actually generates an ROI and focusing on more than just traffic and conversions. What I mean by that is maybe at most 40% of your marketing ROI actually comes from your marketing. Because here's what happens for you to have to make money for the average service-based business. You have to get that click, let's just say advertising. You get that click from your ad, and then they go to your website, landing page, whatever. Now that landing page website has to convert them into a lead. Now your sales team has to convert that lead into a customer. Now your fulfillment team has to fulfill on whatever it is that you promised that customer. And you have to also retain that customer to make sure that you make multiple transactions from them, assuming that's the type of business that you have. You have to make sure you're getting referrals from that customer, so on and so forth. So until you actually sign that deal, until you actually get money from that customer, you haven't made any sort of ROI. And how long you keep that customer has a massive difference on it. There's a really big difference of, if let's say you're a landscaping company or wherever it may be. If you're, for your lawn maintenance clients, if you're retaining them for 6 months, there's a big difference in how much that customer is worth for you compared to if you're retaining them for 2 years. So a lot of people don't really think about that. Everyone thinks of, okay, great, how can you get more clicks? How can we get more conversions? Oftentimes when I talk with people, very rarely do they think of, let me listen to some of our sales calls and see where our team is falling short. Let me see how I can increase my profit margins. Let me see how I can increase my, my customer lifetime value.
Mhm.
because that makes our overall ROI of every activity we do in order to generate money more profitable. So that's number
Mhm.
two. The third thing is, for especially those who aren't used to online marketing, is just hiring whoever comes up first or whoever gives them the lowest dollar amount, because
Mhm.
it's, if you're buying a TV, maybe that's a good strategy. But often, I would say 9 times out of 10, the people that I'm talking to have been burned 1, 2, 3, sometimes more times. Sometimes they haven't even realized that it's been an issue until you dive in there and you're like, hey, you've been spending hundreds of dollars a month on people looking for free or DIY stuff, where it would take 2 seconds for anyone who knows what they do to save you that money. So that's the third thing that I just run into is, unfortunately, a lot of my conversations where people are going after or talking about what the bad stuff that has happened beforehand has happened to them.
Well, I think that happens in any service-based business, but like, you were talking about number two, which is like all of this time and effort and money and, what goes into actually converting from a click to a client. I know for a lot of service-based businesses, especially this little tiny 1 to 5 men shows, the owners are just like, like we're just like, we're so tired.
Right.
Like so how do you guys help streamline that process? And you said you guys are a boutique size firm. So do you generally work with other boutique size service businesses?
So most of our clients tend to be between 1 and 5 million a year. The size of the company really depends on the industry. A 1 to 5 million a year roofing business, sometimes that's like a one-person business.
Mm-hmm.
Where a 1 to 5 million a year, landscaping business, that's much bigger than that typically. So typically, the businesses, whether or not their boutique is, I'm trying to figure out how to answer this in the most concise way possible, but also make it understandable.
Yeah.
Some are smaller, some aren't. It really comes down to the sophistication of their marketing and their business knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
There are businesses who are a couple people, not because that's where they found that they do their best work and because they have a very specific growth plan. It's because they don't know how to grow. There are some times where we start working with businesses and we find out through call tracking that they don't answer 40% of their calls. So, and that's why they're having growth issues. So typically it's not so much the size of the business that I'm looking at as much as the sophistication and the knowledge, because I've worked with fairly sizable businesses that go, okay, great. We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a month on TV ads, but talking about how we can help scale their, whatever objective it is by going from $5,000 to $7,500 in spend in AdWords. And it seems like, whoa, that's way too much money to spend because they're so stuck in that. Their sophistication on the internet or in online marketing isn't there. And then that's very difficult for us to make progress on, where there are other companies that we'll work with that are newer, but they have a higher level of understanding with this and they just can get it. And it's very easy to work with them. It's very easy to get them results because they get it. I don't know if that was a good enough explanation, but it varies business by business.
No, I think that's important. It's important to know that if you're turning up your marketing, you have to answer your calls or you have to understand how it's like how that process works. And I think that's where I always get caught up in like how the marketing process works because I'm super process oriented. So I'm always just like, oh, there's going to be all these phone calls. Not real sure I want that. Who's going to answer those phones, right? So I think it's, understanding like how do we want these people to come in and how do we build the system to, without the wrong people or things like that, especially if we have boutique sized businesses like you and I only want those super qualified leads. I don't even want to know about the other ones. Awesome. So let's talk about SEO because I think it's an important topic that like a lot of people seem to have different takes on. So I'll talk to people and they'll be like, local SEO is really important. And then I'll talk to others. It's like, if you're virtual and you're like nationally based, do you really need local SEO? So can you kind of talk about how SEO works and like really what's important to build SEO?
Sure. So do you want Do you want the kind of what you'll find when you Google what is SEO, or do you want the kind of the back end, like, oh, this is how complicated this really is version?
Can you give me the like middle version?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So whether or not SEO is going to be needed for every business is going to really depend on what they're going after. For some, it's going to be a channel that they're just never going to make progress on realistically. Where I was talking to someone, we have a client that they're more business savvy, so they're willing to take bigger risks. But we looked at their marketplace and we said, yeah, your competitors, you're probably looking at 3 to 5 years before you're going to see much of anything in this channel. It's very mature. The people who are investing in it in your space are going at it very, very aggressively. Other times it's, you're going to be in markets where there's not a whole lot of search volume. If your business is based in a town of 5,000 people, but your main target market is in a different city, if you're trying to rank your Google Maps, you're just not going to be able to do it. It's very proximity based. So there are some factors, whether or not how viable it's going to be for each individual business. But everybody you talk to is going to give you different answers about Google and SEO and how it works for a couple of different reasons. One, nobody knows how it fully works because Google doesn't tell us that. And because of that, not only
Thank you
that,
for admitting that.
Right. And we also have this issue of when Google tells us things, sometimes a lot of those things have actually been disproven, and sometimes Google will contradict itself as well. So there's a lot of different people saying a lot of different things. Everybody's doing their own tests, finding different conclusions. So for example, there are things that people in the local SEO space promote quite a bit right now, such as building links to your Google My Business profile. From all the testing that I've done, I've never seen it have any sort of positive impact. So it's whoever you talk to, you're going to get different answers about different things. Maybe we'll agree on 30, 40, 50, 60%, but no one's going to agree on everything. Google literally changes the algorithm multiple times a day. In 2018, they made over 3,500 changes to their algorithm. It's changing constantly. To give you a very quick idea of how this looks, imagine a dial like you might find on your stove, and this dial goes from 0 to 10. And that is, each dial is a ranking factor. And so, let's say if you have, this is a bad example, but let's say you have to have images on your website, right? So Google wants to see that you have images on your website because it makes it more engaging or whatever it may be. So if you don't have any images, that dial is going to be pretty far down. You have an image or two, that dial might be in the middle. You really, you have this beautiful page and maybe it's really high up there, and that dial goes from 0 to 10. Whatever it is, you have a score that comes off of that, a 5, a 6, whatever it may be. Now, the way the Google works is whoever has the highest score shows up first. Now we don't know what actually contributes to the score fully, so this is how complicated it gets. As quick as I can explain as well, getting too technical.
I think this is great. I love it.
Each dial represents one ranking factor. There are an unknown number of dials. Each dial has a weighted effect or a multiplier effect, if you will, because if you know anything about algorithms, which are just fancy math equations, is that different variables within the algorithm will be weighted differently.
Right.
For example, if you're running track and field, your endurance matters a lot less than your overall speed. Endurance still matters. You still need to run 400 meters or whatever it may be. Right. But if speed's going to matter a lot more in that race compared to cross country, where speed doesn't matter as much. It's going to be weighted much more toward endurance. So behind each one of these dials is, let's say, a weighted dial. So it might be your score times 2. So if you have a 3 on this dial, it's actually worth a 6. Another one is weighted as a 1. So if your dial is a 5, it's a 1. So this is how strong each individual ranking factor is. This is why people say, certain things are more important to do than others. This comes down to the overall weight of that factor. So now what we have is an unknown number of dials. You don't know where your score is on any of these dials. And each of these dials also has an unknown weight attached to it.
Now, this is like tax law.
So not only is it obscured like this, but also Google is constantly, sometimes, maybe, depending on who you ask, adding in new dials, removing dials, tweaking just how they weigh these dials, so things are more or less important than they used to be. And whoever ends up with the highest score shows up first. And this is applied to every time you search something into Google, this calculation is done. This is why you're not going to rank perfectly for everything just because you rank well for one thing. So if, let's say, you're a personal injury lawyer, you might rank number 1 for personal injury lawyer, but maybe you rank number 3 for personal injury attorney, because the dials are different in this case and what you need. Now, here's how it gets more complicated. Different industries and different types of searches can have different weights attributed to certain things. For example, how important is it in the medical field for the content to be written by someone who understands what they're talking about at a very high level? Pretty important. This is where we get into your money, your life type of stuff. If someone's giving out financial advice, someone's giving out medical advice, this is very important that needs to be kind of up to par. If someone's giving you advice on how to vacuum your rug, I don't really care if they give you bad advice, your rug is just a little bit more dirty than it should be, right? Your house isn't going to explode, right? Someone gives you bad medical advice, that could be the difference between life and death. Someone gives you bad financial advice, that could be the difference between you going bankrupt and not, right? So certain things might be more important for certain types of searches. The final thing I'll say on this is also there's something called re-ranking algorithms. What this means is that, okay, great, you go through this process, you have a score. Well, there are certain things that then adjust your score after this. I'm not as well versed in this, but some things that are, quote unquote, theoretically part of this is there's something called click-through rate, which is the percentage of people who searched who actually click in on your listing. How important is that if you're on page 5? Not at all. Very few people actually get to that. But if you're one of the top couple listings, well, if Google's seeing that more people are clicking on the number 2 person than you, that could be an indication to Google that maybe that's actually the better solution for whatever it is that someone's searching for. So that factor doesn't really matter unless you're already ranking. And a lot of this is tinfoil hat. I'm sure there's plenty of people in the industry that would look at my explanation and go, that's not even close to how it works. There's other people that would go, that's too complicated, or that's not complicated enough. But that is, to a certain degree, the complexity of how SEO works and why it's such a black box.
Yeah, I talk to a lot of marketing people. I do it here. I've got my people. I've got people I work with. I've done podcasts and stuff. I don't get it. And it's not because I'm not smart enough. It's because it's completely changing all the time. Thank you for being transparent about that, because there's people that like to talk with authority about SEO when it's just I don't know, or more people clicking on the number 2 because maybe that's what's going to rank you.
I mean, there are some things that historically haven't changed. Title tags are still important. Links are still important. There's always, granted, there are some people who say this stuff isn't important, but the fundamentals are there. It's very easy to think that you know more about how it works than you do. I think it's much more important, and you'll make it much further in the SEO industry if you never believe that you know how it works. Because that's just kind of the general approach that I've always taken, is that
there's more to learn.
Yeah, and people are very bad at changing their minds, but it's something that you have to be really open-minded about, to go, okay, great, here are all these beliefs that I believe, and that makes complete logical sense to me, and here's something that disproves that. Okay, maybe I was wrong, and then actually, figure out, were you actually wrong with that?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
It's great. That's a great metaphor for life, isn't it? Especially right now.
Yeah, not too bad.
And as somebody who's dealing with the PPP loan situation right now, where stuff's literally changing on us daily, I completely understand your pain.
Yeah, that was something that even without understanding all the nuances of it, I just saw constantly just be like, yep, okay, great. People have signed up for this. And now after they have already signed these loans, now the government is changing how this works. I was just looking at that can you do that? I mean, granted, it's the government, they can do whatever they want. I was like, this just sounds horrible.
Yes, I have a whole soapbox about it. We can talk about that later. Awesome. Well, so, what's important for a service-based business to focus on with their marketing efforts? If they're lawyers, we can just do lawyers, because I know you work with a lot of those, and it's just probably a little easier to explain. So if I had let's do personal injury, because I think that they probably do more caseloads than business lawyers or divorce lawyers or things like that. There's probably just more cases. So what's important for them in their marketing efforts generally? Because usually they probably work locally also.
Right. So at a general marketing stance, I typically recommend just focus on whatever's going to bring you the highest ROI. Sometimes we turn people down because, what we're offering, it's just not right for them. Sometimes it's okay, great. Well, in personal injury, Houston, car accident lawyer, $600 a click for Google Ads. In Las Vegas, it can be 100, 150. In Miami, it can be 300. In parts of Arkansas, it can be like $30. So the viability of each individual channel is going to be different based on the, where you are. If you're just starting out, stay away from SEO unless you're in a fairly uncompetitive market. New websites, they take a lot longer to get results. Also, you don't have as much cash to invest in this long term. And most often than not, what's going to happen is you're going to work with someone, then you're going to stop working with them because you don't get the results you want. You work with someone else, you're not going to get results you want. And then the work that those people actually did starts actually generating results because it takes so long. And then the third person you work with, you're like, wow, this is amazing, because you're actually off the back of them. So I focus on what's going to bring you the highest ROI. Sometimes that's on Google. Sometimes it's not SEO. I get it. It's the sexy, unknown, mystery marketing channel because everyone's talking about it. Everyone talks about how high the returns can be, and that's great. But it's also super competitive. It's also a bit of a black box. It's a high risk, high reward strategy. If you look at something like Google Ads is very mature, so the pricing tends to be fairly expensive because there's a lot of people using it, but it's pretty reliable. If you look at certain marketing channels like Facebook ads, this is one of the reasons why we stay away from Facebook ads and we just partner with people that do it, is their platform is constantly changing. It's not nearly as mature. So, day by day, what works, you can change, at a snap. So the first thing at a very high level marketing, kind of getting back to the question, is just focus on what's going to get you the highest ROI. What's going to get you the highest ROI is going to depend on your situation. What are your funds? How long has the business been around for? What is, how many, if you case of lawyers, how many cases are you looking at? If you're looking for a case or two here, again, SEO isn't what you want to do because that just basically opens up the floodgates. You get as much as people are searching for. If you're doing something like, for example, criminal defense lawyer came to me, they were in Arkansas, fairly decent cost per click numbers for both personal injury and criminal defense. Those are the two types of cases that they wanted. Brand new firm. They had basically a default WordPress website, nothing really going for them on that front. It would cost them a couple grand to probably get a nice looking website. Instead, we're able to get a landing page up fairly quickly, start sending ad traffic to it. All they had to do is invest a couple grand a month. Month one, they were already getting cases because, you get clicks right away, assuming that your ads actually get approved and whatnot. So yeah, at a very high level, it's hard to say much more than just you need to figure out what's going to work best for you. But typically, if someone were to, let's say, come to me and say, hey, I want to do this channel, or, of what you do, is this viable for you? Those are some of the things I'm looking at, is just, can you compete in this market? Sometimes a personal injury lawyer came to us. They were in a fairly competitive market, brand new firms. It was like $200 a click. And they said, okay, great. We want to advertise 7 days a week. I said, okay, great. If you're doing that, this is what I would recommend as a minimum clicks. It's going to be like 10, 15 grand just in ad spend alone. If you want to be able to attack this as a strategy, we're going to have enough data to actually know if it's working for you or not, and not just like sit there 2 months waiting to gather data as and whatnot. And it just wasn't a good choice for them because as a brand new firm, they didn't want to risk, 10, 15 grand a month. So, okay, great. This isn't the right strategy for you then.
Yeah.
So,
it's
kind
hard.
of a high level answer, but
no. I think that helps. There's different elements that go into, what is the proper channel, or, what is the proper, depending on the client, where they are and what they want and how they're doing things. So we're a boutique firm. We only work with up to 100 clients. So, anything I would want would be like 1 to 2 clients a month. So if you turn on the floodgates, I'm going to be like, nope, sorry, I'm out. I'm out. I don't want nothing to, because only, 1% of these are probably a good fit for us and what we do. So yeah, it would just depend on, but there's a ton of CPAs in Colorado. So, I don't know, the paper ad probably, or the pay per click's probably not very good.
Yeah, sometimes you'd be surprised because there's with a lot of these channels, it's not just a matter of who's throwing around the most money, but also keep in mind, while you've heard so many companies getting burned and like spending a lot of money not getting great results or whatever it may be, keep in mind your competitors are hiring these same companies as well. So sometimes you go in there and so if you look at, let's say, Google's keyword planner, it'll give you an estimate of what the cost per click is. But that's based on an average of what your competitors are paying. However, it's not just who pays most on Google. There's also something called a quality score, which then is compared against what your cost per click is. This creates your ad rank. Who has the highest ad rank shows up first, and you pay 1 penny more per. So if you're in position 2, you just pay 1 penny more than what it would take to beat out the person in position 3, which isn't necessarily just 1 penny more than what they're paying, because you have to factor in the quality score. So it's a little bit more complicated than that. Whole other math equation. I'll spare you the details there. But what this means is that if your competitor is, let's say, paying $7 per click, and they have a quality score of, let's say, 3, and they're showing up, let's say there's only one advertiser that can show up, just for the sake of example, you might be able to pay $4 if you have a quality score of 10 and actually show up instead of them. And it might not be as cheap. It might be like $5.50 or whatever it may be, but you can beat them on, there are various ways to kind of tackle the market. The only challenge here is it's one of those things that you can't see what your competitors' quality scores are. So until you kind of set up your own account, you see what yours are and you improve them over time, you're not going to know for sure. But if you're wondering what channel is the best for you, if you have an in-house marketing person, that's another thing you should set on their plate. Hey, figure out what channel is best for us. They should be, talking to people, figure out at a high level what's probably best presenting that for you. If you don't, whoever you're talking to, agencies that you're talking to, freelancers you're talking to, they should be walking you through some sort of process to actually figure out what the viability of that channel is for you. Because otherwise you're going to end up in a situation where you're saying, hey, I have $2,000 to invest into SEO. They go, okay, great, give me $2,000. And now we're doing $2,000 a month of work without really knowing that $2,000 is actually going to result in anything.
Yeah.
So you might be happy to pay that, but you probably would be happier if you actually got something for that.
Well, and you also talked about, you might, like, people might hop around to different marketing companies, and then, like, what the first company doing starts paying off. So some of this is about testing, and it's a long game for probably certain, maybe for some and not for others, because it kind of sounds like it depends. But some of this stuff is really long game, right? So, like, there has to be testing on, like, does this work or does that work, or is this particular service that wants these particular types of clients? Like, we just kind of have to figure out how to get there correctly.
Yeah. All of marketing is testing, even within something like SEO. We run tests to see, sometimes you do something that you've done with every other client that has always worked for them. And for whatever reason, Google's like, yeah, no, it's not going to work with this time around. And you have to figure out, what's going on here. So for example, we had a client, they were actually just happened to be a CPA, but we weren't ranking where we thought we should on Google Maps for a specific term. So what we did on a technical basis is we went through their blog posts, we looked at their internal linking, and we redid some of their internal linking. We basically broke out a bunch of spreadsheets to indicate all the changes that we made, where we were ranking, and we tracked that, and we saw no changes. And then 3 weeks later, like overnight, sometimes it just switches. So testing is really important. One of the best channels for looking at this is typically Facebook ads, because on Facebook, you run way more tests than any other channel, where if you see a well built out Facebook campaign, you don't just set up, I think it's a bit of a misconception within the marketing world for business owners who aren't marketing aware, is that, okay, they just know what to do. Sure, we have the skills to do, whatever it may be, but we don't necessarily know that this is going to be the best ad copy out of the gate. We write dozens of ads, we create dozens of creatives, and it's our expertise that creates creatives that we know aren't complete crap, but it's going to be your individual market that's going to tell you what's going to work. I can take the same exact creative from a personal injury lawyer in location A, copy and paste that to a personal injury lawyer in location B, and have a completely different result. Not a minor result, something where, one of them got a 20% conversion rate with this and the other one got a 3% conversion rate with this. So it's a lot of testing, and that's something that, one, isn't always communicated properly to the client, and two, isn't something that's always properly understood by the business. Is that it's not that this channel does or does not necessarily work, you just might not have figured out how to get it to work for you yet. Same thing with like social media. A lot of people just post whatever they feel like on social media. If you want to do it, quote unquote, properly, post different types of content, see what gets the most engagement, what gets the most, whatever your thing is, and then figure it out. Okay, great. Your audience really likes when you post long form content, then focus on that. Cut out all those memes that you've been posting that you thought would be cool to post that as in actually getting any engagement or whatever it may be. So it's mostly testing, and like you said, sometimes we'll get into an ad account that, hey, we worked with someone for 3 months, we didn't get whatever it may be that we wanted to get out of it, and we're looking at that and we're like, yeah, well, you didn't have enough data to actually get that, and within a month, maybe we've actually gotten enough data now we're actually to make those changes. The client's like, hey, great, the other person we hired was crap, you're really good. And like, no, we probably would have done the same exact thing they did, to be honest. It's just that they needed more time. So and at the end of the day, that's on the agency for not, or the freelancer for not communicating that properly. But it's also, you need to go into this expecting that, sometimes it's profitable from day one, sometimes it's profitable 3 months later.
Yeah.
Whatever it may be. Testing is very important.
So I think it's important to so it's the communication of that up front. Like, this is not, we do 6 months or whatever before, because, and I think that's where it gets very confusing, because a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I can just turn it up and down. And I'm like, but how did you get to that point?
Right.
Right. How does that work? And I know even with the podcast, especially when the pandemic happened, our listen numbers are all over the map. They went from Thursdays to weekends right now. We're getting most of our downloads on the weekends now, which before we were getting most of them really on the day that the podcast went out, which is Tuesdays. So it's just very interesting to watch those trends. And my producer tracks all that, because I have no idea how any of that works. But, he was kind of messing with okay, so people are working from home now, and so maybe they'll listen later. And so we kind of started putting the podcast out at different times just to kind of see what happened.
Right. I mean, it's testing, it's taking educated guesses. Sometimes we'll be working with a client and we'll find something that's super obvious, where, for example, we were working with a private practice and we noticed that of the 5 or 6 cities that they were targeting, one of the cities was generating conversions at a fraction of the cost of the other cities. Okay, great. So it was in Manhattan, where there's more than enough people to support our clicks and probably our entire budget here. Let's turn off every other city. Let's just run it here. That may change 6 months from now. And maybe Manhattan becomes a horrible place to run our ads, right? Competition is going to change. Other people could go and figure out the same thing. And then, okay, great. Now everyone's really bullish on Manhattan. And now all these other places where everyone was advertising, no one's advertising anymore. Now we have to switch that. Tuesdays could have been a great time for our ads to be posted. And now we're not getting nearly as good of conversions. So, okay, great. Let's turn back on those Thursdays and Fridays that we turned off, see how those react again. Oh, wow. Thursdays are really good now. Let's focus on there. It's just like Google's algorithm's always changing. Competition is always changing. One of your competitors can decide tomorrow, you know what, let's double our CPCs and see what happens. They could get a bunch, 3 new businesses in your space could open up, and they'll become new competitors that are now investing, which is going to drive up your cost, drive down your ROI. And, maybe the viability of this channel isn't going to be there for the next, 6 months, or whatever it may be. Your ROI might go from a 3x down to a 1.5 because these people are spending a stupid amount of money and they're wasting a bunch of money and they're not going to be profitable. And once they run out of funds, they're going to disappear and you're going to be fine again.
That's why. So this is just kind of all it goes back to, and I say this all the time, you need to have somebody who knows what they're doing in a lot of aspects of your business life, right? So I don't know any business owner that's not a marketing person that would understand all this stuff, right? Or have the time to do all this testing. And that's really where it comes down to. If you want to do marketing, if you want to get this right and you want the best results, you really have to hire somebody who at least understands how to test all this stuff, right? So they need to understand, at least understand how it works, or loosely understand how it works. But also understand that it's a long game, and things are going to change, and it's not a set it, forget it kind of situation.
Yeah. And the way that I like to kind of pose it back to people when they tend to be in the mindset of, okay, great, this is something you set up once, we're going to run it and not have to look at it ever again because we're going to be the best. Well, can't your competitors do that too? Right? So if somebody helps you rank number 1 and you pay them, isn't it logical that one of your competitors can pay somebody else to help them now rank number 1? And what happens to you then, of course, right?
Or that same person.
Right. So it's not
that same person's just doing 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Right. So it's not just a something that you can get compliant or even really lazy about, especially if you're number 1. That's the biggest mistake people make, is that they become number 1 and then they get lazy thinking that, okay, great, I'm here, I'm going to stay here. And then, they wake up and something has happened. As
They're
a
gone.
story of this is it's not going to be super applicable to every industry because personal injury is a bit weird where you can wake up and you can just have like $1 million case that just happened to call you.
Yeah.
But one of our clients, they're in a market that is very competitive, and the person who dominates right now did not dominate a couple of years ago. A couple of years ago, this was a firm that had a couple of attorneys. They were kind of online. They had some presence, not bad, not great, getting some cases in, just kind of, another of the, 30, 50, 70 firms in the area. It's a very condensed area. So there's a lot of different firms there, just, kind of like another firm. And they got a very large case. I don't know exactly how much it was worth, but this is just from hearing right from their competitors about what happened with this firm. And they didn't just go, okay, great, here's all this money, great, here, let's throw a party, let's give myself let's buy myself a new Lamborghini or whatever it may be. They said, okay, great, let's get the best website possible, let's get the best content possible on this website, let's invest in the best SEO company that we can possibly find. Unfortunately, it wasn't us that was hired, it was another company. But they have invested very bullishly on their marketing. They have, within a couple of years, they are now so far ahead of the local competition that it's, unless someone's looking to put up serious money, you're very unlikely. Or if these guys start using a list of strategies that end up knocking them down just because of the way that search works, then these guys are very unlikely to be beaten anytime soon. And they probably know that. They're spending a good amount of money. I can see looking at their site that if an article comes out today that talks like 10 a.m. that talks about this new strategy that you can try on SEO that seems to be working, probably by 11:30 it's been implemented on their site. They're very fast on it, stuff that I'm like, oh wow, almost a lot of people are lazy in the SEO space. The companies themselves, for various reasons, that's a whole other discussion. But typically if something comes out today, people will start implementing it 6, 12, 24 months from now. So it's very rare to see companies that are actually on top of it, but they are so on top of it that basically your chances of beating them is either do it, they just happen to get lucky with a case that's going to give you the funds to really compete against them, or invest a serious amount of money for a serious amount of time and hope that they get lazy. Because if they don't, they're number one right now. They're getting the most amount of cases. If they keep reinvesting what they're making from these cases into their SEO and their overall online marketing, they go, okay, great, our content is converting, or website's converting at 20%. How do we get that 22%? Our intake team is converting 30% of phone calls into cases. How can we get that to 35%? They're looking at it and going, okay, great, our profit margins are 40%. How can we get that to 42.5%? You're just simply not going to beat them. So you have two options. Either one, become that competitor in your market, because in most markets that person doesn't exist yet. Most markets there isn't that person that has, that is kind of the Goliath of it. Or you either become that, or you wait for someone to do that, and then you basically sit there and go, oh well, I probably should have done that. So a lot of people, okay, great, the number one, okay, what's next? Well, your website kind of sucks, you should upgrade that. It's not even something we do. It's just, okay, great, hire someone to do that. We'll facilitate it. If it's a client of ours, we'll talk to them because we can talk to them at a technical level, but also like, okay, great, your content was written by your sister's son who is an English major. Okay, great. Well, the content isn't sales copy. What about these sales writers who actually understand psychology, who are going to write an incredibly emotional piece of content that's going to connect with someone, that's going to make them want to specifically hire you? Sure, it's going to be expensive, but it doesn't matter what the price is if the ROI is going to be there. Some are the top writers that we'll connect clients with, they charge $1,500 for a single page. However, if that $1,500 helps you make an extra $5,000 a year in profit, and you can use that content for the next 3 to 5 years, okay, great. How many other your competitors are actually going to invest in that?
Yeah.
Maybe one if you're lucky. Oh, if you're unlucky, rather. So
yeah,
in most
and
markets,
just,
there isn't a Goliath.
Yeah, I think that's probably very true. I mean, unless we're dealing with like big firms, but even they just go off their names a lot of time. Like, especially if we're dealing with like in that CPA space, right? There's probably not a lot of people out there like hiring content writers and things like that. I mean, we're in the middle of a whole new website rebrand situation right now. We're putting the CPA firm and the podcast together. I hired somebody. I was like, I need you to do my strategy and my content and just go. Like, just go, because I don't want to do it anymore because I didn't do it right. Don't ask me to do content. I don't write things. I do bullet points. Okay. If you want me to write something for content, it's going to be bullet points.
I'm the same way.
Yeah. So it's just important to get the right person and the right people in there. Again, it just all comes back to like, this isn't set it forget it stuff, right?
Yeah.
If you want to if you want to kick ass and you want to be number one, especially in a really competitive space, you have to hire those people that are on top of stuff. It's not gonna,
for sure.
and that costs money to have people that responsive.
Yeah, and for clarification, you don't have to be, it's not just the law firms that can make like $1 million in a case they just happen to get. It can be any sort of industry. The point that I was trying to make there is just invest and reinvest. That's another thing that people just don't, that I often don't see people do is, okay, great. You're spending $1 to make 5. Let's spend 10 to make 50. Let's spend 100 to make 500. Let's spend 1,000 to make 5,000. And the overall ROI percentage may go down. Maybe you spend 1,000 to make 4,500. Your ROI percentage goes down, but your overall volume goes up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing is, how, you should always be looking at where your weaknesses are and then focusing on improving them. Just like when I was talking about with the, what marketing channel is going to be best for you, look at what marketing channel is weakest for your competitors. So for example, in the CPA space, I'm not in it very often, but the one thing I always notice when I'm in that space is that the websites are almost always horrible, that they haven't been updated in forever. Probably I'm going to go off a whim here, but I'm assuming it's because most of these businesses are very referral based, that their web presence doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. That, when you work with someone on a yearly basis, it's a pain to move to a different accounting. I've done it twice, right? You have to figure out your systems. You have to figure out everything. There's so many questions. It's a pain. So, it just becomes a lot less important. And then all it takes is maybe not even that great of a website to already be the most, not just the most easy to look at and the best looking, because that's going to be, mm-hmm. beauty's in the eye of the beholder, mm-hmm. but the most functional, the easiest to actually see, okay, how much is it going to cost you to do our bookkeeping? Well, maybe you actually have an internal calculation that you use. Okay, great. Put that calculator on your website, mm-hmm. and now people can actually interact with that website. Now you have a calculator. That's how you determine like your bookkeeping fees or how much it's going to cost you to do, whatever it may be, or what is, what is the overall weakness of people? If, okay, nobody in your local market is producing informational content about finances, mm-hmm. well, guess what? Finances are scary for most people. That was one of my biggest concerns when I got into business is I don't know how to allocate all these expenses. I don't know how to classify any of this even before I was able to hire an accountant. But if somebody was there who was there was like, okay, great. Here's how to use QuickBooks. Here's who you need to issue a 1099 to. Mm-hmm. Here's who you need to send a W-9 to, or who should be requesting a W-9 for you. Here's, mm-hmm. Okay, great. Here's your 1099K, for your partnerships, or here's when you should move into getting, should you be an LLC? Should you have your S-Select or whatever mm-hmm. it may be? Like, these are so many questions that I had, that there are so many things out there, but if you become the authority in it, at the end of the day, it just levels you up. Branding is also very important. Okay, great. Now you're going to local meetup groups, and you're there as the accounting person, and when people have questions, you're like, oh, I have a 15-minute video on that, right? I don't have to waste your time with this. Here's an interactive video that you can go watch on YouTube. Okay, great. Now listen to that, and now more and more people know your name. And guess what also happens? This can also help you with your SEO. Why? You rank number 2, but I know her name. I've heard of her before. I'll click on her instead. Yeah. But if you didn't appear there, maybe we'll just click on a competitor. So I'm sure that was a lot right there, but
no, it goes back to, and because I talk to my marketing person all the time, he's like, you have so much content. That's the thing they love about like any marketing person I talk to, because they're like, you're a CPA with a weekly podcast. Holy crap. They're like, usually the fight mostly with CPAs is actually creating content, right? So it's just, and especially like, and I always say this, like we work with women on veterinary and dental clinics. And there's a lot of parallels between the accounting industry and the veterinaries. But, you're right. Like there's a lot of websites that haven't been updated. There's a lot of places where you can't go get really good information or learn about their process or, do anything like that, because it's really just a lot of old white dudes still working in the businesses. But that's going to change really soon. And that's not what people are looking for. They're looking for, can I order my stuff online? Or, can I go to, especially for like the veterinary, can I do my animals pharmacy stuff on your website? Or do you have a link where I can go do that? Because people really just, they want to do it. They want the easy button, right? And they're going to go to the person who is the easy button.
Yeah. A lot of businesses right now are set up for just bottom of the funnel, which means people who are already ready to make a decision, right? Going back to, people that have really bad websites, is because those websites are mainly just so that they own their domain. So that someone who already knows that they want to work with them, it's like, oh yeah, that's their address, that's their phone number. Well, what about the people who know that they need your solutions, but are still looking at you and your competitors? What about people who have no idea if this is right for them, and they're just looking for general information, right? So this is a example I say all the time that I haven't seen anybody do it yet, but for just an idea. Family lawyers. There's a lot of people who don't want to pay a lawyer. Okay, great. Create a DIY divorce course and charge someone $500 for it. So they want to DIY their own divorce. Great. If they really can't afford a lawyer, then you were the person to go to for that DIY divorce course. If they do it themselves, great. Obviously, with all the legal, like, hey, this doesn't create attorney-client relationship and all that other kind of stuff. But okay, great. They figure out just how complicated it is. Well, guess what? They can hire you, and you'll charge them your own rate minus $500. So that course didn't cost them anything.
Right.
So there's, okay, great. Now you are now making money off of people who are specifically trying to hire someone for free. Okay. Who else in your marketplace is doing that?
Yeah.
Right?
It makes so much sense.
Who else is going to, a local, women's center meetup, whatever it may be, and going, hey, if you do have this challenge, well, we have training materials on how to navigate these family law issues and how child custody works, or how the whatever it may be, and here's our divorce course if you are low on funds. Okay, great. One, that will probably have you way more known in the community. Two, with all those free resources, that's probably pretty easy for you to get local press as well. Three, also, it's another revenue stream for those people that do have the funds that thought that they could do it from themselves, and they go, oh, wow, this is actually really more complicated. And now you're able to attack a market that nobody else is going to attack. And if you get in on that, creating a course is a lot of work. Probably going to take you 6 to 12 months. Yeah. So that even if all your competitors go, wow, that's really cool, I want to do that too, you probably have 6 to 12 months to make yours way better. Yeah. If not, because let's be real, they're going to go, oh, that's a stupid idea. 12 months later, they're going to go, oh, it actually seems to be working out for them. 6 months after that, they're going to go, oh, we should start looking into that. 6 months after that, they start working on it, and 90% of them won't make it to the end.
Yeah. No, because it's a lot of work. I'm in the process of outlining one myself right now, and it's just overwhelming amount of work, especially for us, like highly detailed people, because it's like, what do we need to do that's just high level, right? Awesome. All right. Before I ask my last question, where is the easiest way for people to find you?
Sure. So the easiest way to find me is at TEAM bluedog.com. Depending on when this goes live, depending on when you try to visit the website, it may redirect because we're currently going through a rebranding over to Comet Fuel. So so if you even go there, if the rebrand's already done, it'll automatically redirect you.
Okay.
But I invite you to come and check out some of our content. We have a couple of free tools for people if you're interested on the SEO front, a keyword research automation sheet. On the Google Ads front, we have a PPC lead generation calculator that kind of walks through what you might be able to expect from a Google Ads campaign. Feel free to check that out. And if you want to take the conversation further, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. And we'll drop all the links in the description box. Emily does that for us because she's amazing. So in your opinion, what is the number one thing a business should do today to grow their reach?
So the number one thing I always recommend for people is back to one of the biggest mistakes that people make. And this is something that I talk about. If you look at the other shows that I've been on, I talk about this very heavily, is really setting up all your tracking. So okay, great. Somebody, and I'll go through this very quickly for the sake of time. Somebody clicks from your Google ad onto your landing page. That's built-in tracking. You can already see that through Google Analytics, Google Ads, so on and so forth. Somebody converts. Have your form tracking set up. Have it set up, and you can Google how to do this. Have it set up with UTM codes so you can actually see the traffic source that they came in from as a form field. Set up something like CallRail so you can see where your calls came from, the actual source that they came from. Have that feed into your CRM. Now, your CRM is telling you not only how many new contacts you have, but where those contacts came from. Your CRM, depending if you use it all in one, if you have a different system for this. If you also track, okay, great, how many of those people actually turned into customers/clients, and how much did those customers/clients pay us? And you track that over the historical period of them being, from the first transaction they ever had with you to the last transaction they ever had with you, you'll know exactly how much each of these channels are worth. Combine that, and it sounds complicated, the tracking for most of this stuff, a lot of it, if you're using any common platforms like Salesforce, Infusionsoft, things like that, it's generally out of the box, like one-click integration. Zapier, again, super easy setup for most of this stuff. Just Google it, and most of the time you'll be able to figure it out. If not, there are plenty of people that are automation experts that you can just hire, give them like $20, $50 and they can set up for you. It's very simple. Next is when you have that tracking set up, or in conjunction, or while you're waiting for it, whatever it may be, actually outline, okay, great. How much traffic are we getting? Let's say we're doing online stuff. How much is it costing us? What is our conversions? What is our conversion rate? When people call in from us, what percentage of the time do we actually close them? When they do close them, what is our lifetime value? What is our profit margins? And focus on optimizing each of those different areas. The reason being is at the end of the day, that determines how much your business will profit at the end of the day. Not to be redundant there. So if you can turn spending $1 on Google Ads and getting a $5 in return from spending $1 and getting $15 in return. Why? Because you did things like once a quarter, record all your internal calls and review them. Okay, great. Why is our sales team winning certain calls, or intake team, and losing certain ones as well? What can we do to overall improve? What courses can we take in terms of improving our overall systems and processes, in terms of improving our overall close rates? Okay, great. How can we improve our overall customer lifetime value, retain them for more, charge them more? How can we reduce our overall expenses, sit down with your accountant team, so on and so forth? You do a couple of those things, which most people ignore, mostly because people think that they're the best at everything that they do. You don't get into business for yourself not having some sort of ego, because most people get into business because they think they could do it better than whoever was paying them to do it beforehand. So a lot of people that I talk to, nope, we close everyone that comes to us. Nope, we charge as much as we possibly can. Nope, our profit margins are as good as they can be. That's just not the case. So when you do figure that out, it helps you become that Goliath a lot easier when you turn it going from $1 to $5, which may be what most people are in your area doing, because everyone focuses on improving traffic and conversions. When you actually focus on your sales rate, your lifetime value, your overall profit margins, etc., you turn that $1 into 17. It's a lot easier to be a lot more aggressive. It's a lot easier to make bigger plays. It's a lot easier to spend more per click and get a lot more volume out of that. Most people just don't do that.
Tracking is the answer. I love it. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, no worries whatsoever.
Thank you so much for listening or watching. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, or wherever you prefer to listen. If you learned something and found some useful information to apply to your business today, please consider giving us a thumbs up and a review. Until next week, be abundant.